everybody! One of you asked for a bear ham recipe, and it just so happens that is something I've always wanted to try. But I'd never had enough bear meat to do one, until now. I'm making this smoky, deli-style bear ham that everyone's gonna love. So let's get started. I'm not going to be doing a whole ham today because the whole ham off of this bear weighed at least 50 pounds. And besides not needing 50 pounds of bear ham, curing a piece of meat that large is difficult to do in a home setting. The bigger the cut, the longer it takes to cure, and if the cure takes too long to penetrate, you can get some spoilage and bone souring, which is bacterial growth and spoilage around the bones and joints. For big chunks like that, I'd have to inject the curing solution all around the bones and into the joints and just hope I didn't miss anything. Aside from that, simply storing something of that size when it cures is going to be a challenge for most people, and I want to keep this simple for the home curer. And this is going to be a city ham, meaning that it's going to be cured and then smoked and cooked rather than a dry cured country ham. Bears frequently have trichinosis, so it really needs to be cooked to make it safe to eat. So what I've got here is a nice chunk off of one of the hams, and I'm going to start by tying this up into a nice tight cylinder. When you're curing solid cuts of meat, the weight, the girth, and the shape of the meat affect curing time, and a cylinder of meat cures slightly faster than a flatter cut. Don't ask me why, and don't tell me why, because at this point I am reserving what little brain capacity I have left to learn other things rather than the physics of cure penetration through random meat shapes. Some things are better off just relegated to faith. I just want to get this tied up into the most uniform cylinder that I can. That's also going to help with even cooking. That looks pretty good. Now I'm going to pop this back into the fridge for a little bit while I work up the curing solution. I'm doing a 5-pound recipe today because that meat tube just happens to weigh in at 5 pounds. But as usual, I'll also put a recipe using metric measurements down in the description of the video. And I really do encourage you to embrace metric measurements and apply percentages when weighing all of your ingredients if you're curing meats, because it is more precise than using cups and spoons, and it's gonna allow you to plus up or reduce down the recipe without having to figure out how much 7/8 of a third of a cup is. Once you start applying percentages to your ingredients, you can begin with any random amount of meat and always get consistent results. Now, let's take a look at the brine ingredients for this roast beast. Now, of course, I'm gonna need some salt, and I'm gonna do 3% salt content on this one today. You could take that down probably as low as 2 if you're sensitive to salt content. I'm gonna be using some brown sugar today, and I'm going in at 2% content. And when I talk about percentage, I'm talking about a percentage of the weight of the meat and any liquid you're using combined. And 2% is not going to make a particularly sweet ham. If you like those really sweet honey baked type of hams, you can take that up to 5%, no problem. It's really up to you. Now for flavorings today, I'm going to start with some allspice, and normally I would use whole allspice, but I've lost my berries, so this is some ground allspice. I've got some whole cloves, some whole black peppercorns, and these are some juniper berries, just to give it a little of that flavor of the forest where it came from. And I'll be adding in 1 bay leaf, and this is a fresh bay leaf, so it's got quite a bit of flavor. If you're using dried bay leaves, go ahead and throw as many as you want in there because they don't taste like anything. And very importantly, here is my cure, and this is Pink Cure number 1, also known as Prague Powder number 1. Now, the most important things here are the salt and the sugar and the cure. As far as these flavorings go, you can use whatever you like. You can use more or less of any of these here, and you can actually go pretty crazy with the amount you put in, because in the solution, the meat is not going to pick up a ton of flavor from these spices. It's not really going to penetrate far into the meat. It's mostly going to add some flavor to the surface, and it's not going to be very strong. So get wild, get loose, and use whatever you like in whatever quantity you like. I'm keeping this nice and simple today, so I've got equal parts of all the spices, except for the bay leaf. I am using some water today, and a good rule of thumb here is to go between 40 and 50% of the weight of the meat and use that amount of water. So for my 5 pounds of meat today, I'm gonna make it simple, and I'm using 1 quart of water. Now, if you want to get a little bit more flavor out of your whole spices, you can take a portion of the water, or all of the water, and steep those spices in there for around 10 minutes. Then let that get all the way chilled down and use that as the base for your brine. Well, that is what I'm going to do today. And I'm just going to smack up my whole spices just a little bit to open them up. Just gonna pop them a few times to crack everything open and get at the good flavor that's inside. Now I'll just put in go ahead and go with half of the water, a couple of cups today. I'll go and I'll bring this up to just barely a simmer and let that steep there for around 10 minutes. Then I'll probably put this outside so it gets nice and cold, nice and quickly, and then we'll come back and cure that bear. Okay, my spicy tea is nice and cold now. And if you want to dissolve the salt and the sugar in here, that's perfectly fine, but don't put the cure in there. You don't want to heat that up or you're going to deactivate it. So now I will stir in my salt, my brown sugar, a little more of the water in there to help that dissolve. I can go ahead and put the cure in as well. Make sure you get that all in there. Now I've got my bear all tied and sacked. So all that's left to do is get in the brine. If it's not completely dissolved, that's not going to be a problem. This is going to be in here for a long time. I'll get out as much of the air as I can. I may go submerge it in a bucket of water after this, but as long as it's all covered, it'll be okay. I'll pop that in a little secondary containment before I put it in the refrigerator. I don't know why or how, but it seems like my Ziplocs always spring a little leak. Now, as far as the curing time goes, this is a pretty big boy right here. It's going to take a good 10 days for that cure to get all the way through to the core. But again, that is gonna depend on the weight, the girth, and the shape of your meat. And curing time for a big thing like this is another thing that I don't bother trying to figure out on my own. I will go online to look up a handy curing calculator where I can punch in my information and it'll tell me exactly how long this needs to cure for. And the one I used to use I think has been deactivated, but I'll find another one and put a link to that down in the description. So now I just need to pop this into the refrigerator for the next 10 days or 2 weeks. Every now and then I'll get in there and roll it over, make sure every bit of that is submerged in that cure. So we'll be back here in 10 days or so to get this ready for the smoker. And just like that, we are back. This big chunk of meat here was probably gonna take around 10 days to get that cure to fully penetrate. And it has been 2 weeks because jobs. But now it's time to get this thing ready to smoke. And the first step is gonna be to get the surface of it a little bit dried out. So I'm gonna get this drained off. Rinsing it is optional. Once we get this thing heated up, any cure that's remaining on the surface is gonna be deactivated. So you don't have to rinse. Some people like to. I'm not gonna rinse because I've got some little herbs and spices on there and I want those to stay on there. Now I'm just gonna soak up as much of that liquid as these paper towels can absorb. Now onto a little drying rack. Now there's a couple of ways you could do this. I could take this and put it on a rack, room temperature, put a fan on there for probably a couple hours until that surface gets a little tacky. But it is a little late in the day for me to start smoking this thing now. So what I'm gonna do is just put this into the refrigerator on the rack, leave it uncovered for a day, and that should do the same thing. Bring out the sugars a little bit and get that surface a little sticky, a little dried out, and that is gonna help that thing absorb more smoke. And if you want any kind of herb or spice crust on here, now is the time when you can put your rub on there, and as this thing dries out, those spices are gonna stick on there very well. So if you want a black pepper crust, maybe some mustard seeds in there, now's the time to get that done, and it's gonna work out really nicely for you. I'm gonna leave this thing as is. I think it's got plenty of spice stuck to it just from the brine. And I will be back here tomorrow to finally smoke this bear for the second time. It is dark and early on another beautiful sausage Sunday. This piece of meat is gonna take a very long time to cook and smoke, so I wanna get a really early start on it. It's been in the refrigerator for about 12 hours, and the surface is fairly dry now and ready to soak up some smoke. Now I've got my smoker preheated to a very low 150 degrees Fahrenheit with apple wood today. I'm gonna go put this out there right now, and later when it gets daylight outside, we can talk about the different ways to smoke and cook your bear ham. Now I've got my ham out here in the smoker at 150 degrees Fahrenheit, and it has actually already been out here for 6 hours. The sun finally came out here, but it's still freezing cold. So let's get a quick look at this guy. See how we're doing. It's a little difficult to see. Get in there. That's got a nice dark color to it now. Sort of a mahogany color. And I think that looks like it's picked up enough smoke. I'm going to be using a 2-stage process on the ham today. The first stage is smoking, and for me, I like to do that at temperatures of 150 degrees Fahrenheit and below. Those low temperatures give smoke time to actually penetrate into the meat, and give you a good smoky flavor. Keep in mind though that the longer you go at those temperatures, the more moisture you're gonna lose through the smoking phase. So the lower temperature you use, the longer you can smoke that. If you want it to be very intensely smoky, you could even cold smoke this for just about as long as you like before moving to the second stage, which is cooking. And that cooking is going to be done at temperatures from 180 degrees Fahrenheit and up. Now once you move into cooking, the surface of that meat is going to cook quickly, and it's going to kind of anneal, and then it's going to be more difficult for smoke to penetrate. You're still going to gather some smoke on the outside, and that's going to add some smoky flavor, but it is not my ideal way of doing this. You could just go full-on brisket style and pop that thing into a 250 degree smoker and let it go until it's done. But it's not gonna be a really rich, smoky ham that I am looking for. Once your smoking phase is done and you're moving on to cooking, here you've got some options. You could finish it right here in the smoker. I would wrap this thing up with foil, bring my smoker up to around 275, and then cook that off to an internal temperature of between 195 and 200 degrees Fahrenheit. I like mine on the lower end of that, so I will usually pull it at 195, give it a good long rest, and that gives you a nice sliceable roast. You take it up to 200, and it's going to be more of a pull-apart kind of roast. So it's really up to you and how you want it to be. Another option is to take it after your smoking period and then pop that thing in an oven. And for that, I would stick it into a roasting pan, cover it up, and probably cook that at 300 or 325 degrees Fahrenheit, and still go for those same internal temperatures of between 195 and 200. But with this one, I want a cold cut deli style ham. So my smoke time out here is done. That thing looks nice and dark and smoky. So I'm gonna raise the smoker temperature up to 275 just for an hour, just to kind of crust up the outside. Then I'm gonna bag this thing up and finish it off in a sous vide water bath. Now first, I'm gonna force all the air out of this bag. Now I do have a little bit of figuring to do on how I want to cook this. It's got to cook for a very long time, and normally when I do beef, I'll put it in the sous vide at 130 or 135 degrees Fahrenheit and let it go for long enough to tenderize it to where I want it. But since most bears have trichinosis, I need to cook this to a higher temperature than 135 degrees Fahrenheit. USDA guidelines say that 160 degrees is enough to kill that trichinosis. So what I'm going to do is start this at 145 degrees, and I'll let it go at that temperature for probably around 18 hours until I get home from work tomorrow. And at that point, I will turn the water bath up pretty high so I can finish this thing off and get it up to 160 degrees pretty quickly without losing too much juice. And hopefully that gives us a really nice product. So I'll preheat this water bath, and then this is gonna go for a good 18-hour swim. Now this has been going for 19 hours at this point, and I'm gonna hope that that is enough to get it tenderized. I started it at 145 degrees, then I came down after a few hours and it was already starting to look kind of juicy in the bag, so I dropped that down to 140 degrees, and I've just been letting it ride there until now. But now it does appear that my Ziploc did spring a leak. So if I do this again, I'll vacuum seal it. Even with the water in the bag there, I don't think it's gonna make a whole bunch of difference once I get this out and dry it off. We may lose just a slight hint of smokiness, but I think I've got that deep enough into the meat that it's not gonna be an issue. Not ideal, however. But now I want to bring it up to 160 degrees internal, just to be completely safe and make sure I don't serve anybody any parasites. So I've gone ahead and put a temperature probe down into the center of that, and I'm going to raise the temperature of the water bath up to 170 degrees to finish it off as quickly as I can. And that is 10 degrees hotter than they recommend going with these Ziplocs, but I don't really think that is an issue at this point. And once I do hit that internal temperature that I want, I'm going to get it right out of here and down into a cold water bath to stop that cooking and prevent any carryover cooking. And that should give me the juiciest product that I can make. Okay, we're at 160 degrees now, and I think I'm actually going to try to get this out of that murky water and into another bag that I'll have right down in the cold water. Could be tricky. I don't know if it's going to fit in that other bag. Ooh, well, still got great color to it. Oh yeah, down in that bag. Now, I don't have any ice handy, so I'm gonna take this over to the sink and just run cold water over it for a little while, get that thing cooled down. All right, here we are. Now, that looks good and it smells really nice. One final stage, I want to get that surface dried out. So, you can put the fan on there, but I'm just going to go ahead and pop this into the refrigerator one more time overnight, and then we can try this guy out tomorrow. I know, it's a lot. It has been a long, slow process, but now it is finally time to unleash this growler and see how we did. Take a look at that. Man, that is a beautiful color. Not exactly what I was expecting. That is some deep red. Might even be alarming to some folks thinking it wasn't cooked, but I assure you, it has cooked thoroughly. It's got a great smoky smell to it. Looks great, and it's boneless, so it slices beautifully. Of course, what really matters is the taste. Check out that bite. Oh wow, that is some bear ham. Texture, pretty good. It's tender enough. It's really nice and smoky. But it's very interesting. The flavor of bear is more similar to beef than it is to pork, so this doesn't taste like a hog ham, but it doesn't taste exactly like beef either. Somewhere in between. I did steer toward the lower end on sugar content, so it's not extremely sweet, but it does have a really good balance between the sweet and the savory. But if you're into one of those really sweet honey baked style hams, go ahead and plus up that sugar 2-3 times even. But I like it like this. Let's try that with a little bit of that spicy mustard. nice. It hasn't dried out at all. A nice vein of fat right there probably helped things out. You know, it actually has sort of similar notes to that dried beef that comes in the little jar. It's not nearly that salty, but if you wanted to make some chipped beef gravy out of this, I got a feeling that would be spectacular. It's definitely gonna make a great sandwich, and I can't wait to slice off a chunky steak, heat that up in a skillet, and you can freeze this and still have the option to pop it in the oven and make a nice holiday roast, and it'll take much less time to cook. It's hamazing! Yum! I consider this an excellent result for a first try, and if I never changed that recipe at all, I would be happy with it. Of course, I'm always going to be testing and tweaking things down here in Kielbasa Corner, and if you decide to tweak it too, let me know what you did and how it came out down in the comments. But if you do want to leave it as is and try it just like I did it, you should get some pretty great results, and I know you're going to love it. Thanks for watching.